Hello and welcome to my brand new podcast. I'm Nicky Raby and I'm thrilled that you're joining us. I do lots of things. I'm an actor, coach, writer, speaker and a mum. And in my coaching work, I work with creatives, personal brands, freelancers and small businesses. In this podcast, I want to talk about success, but not in the traditional sense. I want to bring you conversations that discuss success, what it means, and how there are many different versions. We're going to be talking about business, branding, becoming visible, saying no, saying yes, and how you can create a thriving portfolio career doing more of what you love and less of what you don't. Sometimes there can be a certain mystery around the online world, so I'm going to be asking my guests how they started and grew, how they get paid, how they stand out, and how they create success on their terms. As always, please check the show notes for all things we mention and come and say hi over on social media at Nicky Raby or via my website nickyraby.com/podcast. In today's episode, I'm talking to Anya Hayes, who is a mum of 2 boys and an author, 4 books, no less, a speaker and a Pilates teacher on a mission to help women feel better in their body, mind and spirit. Freelance mum doing the self-employed mum Krypton factor every day. I know that juggle very well. I love chatting to Anya. If you don't follow her across social media, I really would recommend it. She's such a lovely, calm and supportive force on there, and I really appreciate her words every single day popping up to spur me on and to make me believe that I too can do this. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Come on over to Instagram.com/Nicky Raby and join in the conversation. And if, as always, you're interested in working with me, you can go to nickyraby.com/coaching for some more information. And there you'll find all the show notes too. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi, Anya.
Hello.
Hello. How are you doing?
Really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So just to kick things off, I would love to know and for you to describe what you do.
What do I do? This is the $1 million question for me. I know I need to refine my answer. I am a Pilates teacher. I'm an author and I'm also a freelance editor and sort of project editor, general editorial dog's body, that's been my sort of bread and butter over the last 10 years as a freelancer. But yeah, mainly what I do at the moment is I'm a Pilates teacher and I'm an author, so I have books out there.
Fantastic. And how did that become sort of your newly fledged career? How did that personal side of writing occur?
Well, I think with anything in this, when you're a freelancer, I think you get more comfortable with the idea of saying, yeah, I can do that, to things that you might not necessarily have said yes to when you were in a permanent, safe, full-time position somewhere. So although looking back on my career, it seems to have sort of logical steps from one point to the next, it's always been sort of serendipitous meetings and things that have happened here and there. So getting into the writing, I went about 8 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, blimey, when I was a Pilates teacher and I was working in also 2 days a week as a project editor in a health and fitness publisher. And through an editorial contact, I was asked to be a Pilates model for a book that was being produced. And I turned up to the shoot. And if you've ever been involved in book publishing, normally if you're doing exercise books, the models will arrive and there's a list of exercises they need to do and it's all been planned beforehand. But I turned up and they said, right, so can you think of some exercises that you might need to do for pre and postnatal or for osteoporosis or for this scenario and this scenario? And I was like,
just off the top of my head.
Yeah. And so I went, yeah, I can do that, and ended up modelling this for a day, kind of, and then hastily going home afterwards going, God, I really hope all the stuff that I was doing was appropriate. And it was, thankfully. And then I got an email from the editor saying, that was great, thanks for doing that, and can you write it all up for us? So it was a slightly unusual way of going about an exercise book. I think this sort of Pilates had been an idea that they hadn't fully fleshed out. And so I wrote this section, and then about a year later, I got an email out of the blue saying, I was working on that book a year ago, and I noticed that you wrote this section, and we wondered whether you'd like to write a Pilates book for us. And it was one of those things in life where my internal reaction was, there's no way. How could I write a book? No, of course not. That's ridiculous. But I found myself externally going, yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do it by tomorrow. No problem.
Yeah, exactly. So that, and I was actually pregnant with Morris at the time. So I had my own kind of slightly strict deadline to work towards in terms of getting the book done. So that was my first foray into writing, because I was working at the time, again, working in editorial career alongside teaching. So I've always been, for the last 10 years, basically kind of this slightly disparate but parallel lines of a portfolio career, which have now started making sense and converging a bit more. But at the time I was thinking, am I ever going to marry my two sides of my professional life? And so I wrote that book just before Morris was born. And then it sort of, at the time, felt like quite a standalone project. I don't think I would have sort of ever introduced myself as an author. It felt like quite a kind of, I wrote a book, but I was a bit sort of, not, what's the word? I was just a bit, I didn't really believe that I was an author. I didn't feel like that was something I could legitimately, announce myself as. And then I got off the back of that book, I got asked to write another book. So that's sort of book number 2. It was another Pilates book. And I wrote that while Morris was sort of between 8 months and a year. So I have no idea how I managed to write that with no
Isn't
sleep.
it funny we look back on those times and go, how did that work? How many of me were there to be able to do those sort of things?
Yeah, it's just, I'm always nervous. I know it's a good book, but I do look at it and go, oh, some of it I don't remember writing because I was so sleep deprived. And luckily my brain was functioning on some level. And then, that was book number 2. And then book number 3 came out of an editorial contract. So I've always been, basically, I used to be a managing editor in book publishing. And so that's kind of, that's been my, I would say, the top of my CV would be freelance editor and project manager. And from a contact of some editorial work I was doing, I got asked if I could basically revise and rewrite a book that currently had been published about 10 years ago. And that was a pregnancy book. And then the same publishers of that, I sort of approached them with a book about anxiety and motherhood, and that's the book that ended up being The Supermum Myth, which I wrote with a clinical psychologist. So it's sort of been an evolution. With each book I've felt slightly more confident presenting myself to someone, saying, yes, I'm an author, but I still say it with a slightly disbelieving tone in my voice. I'm an author.
I know, isn't it funny, these things of I'm running my own business, but please don't ask me about it. It's such a just talking about yourself and actually saying I'm really good at what I do is so difficult, even though we've grown humans and cared for people or done things. That's still quite a tricky situation.
The syndrome.
And so
all the time.
I guess where are you now with it? Now the book has come out and it's fantastic. And what new perspective have you had as you've moved through these areas?
The great thing about The Supermum Myth, in the writing of it, I felt that, I wrote the book and I basically consulted with Dr. Rachel Andrew, who's the clinical psychologist. So every chapter I would send to her and ask her for therapies that she would introduce at sort of stages that I had said, maybe we could put something here as an activity for this thing. And what was extraordinary about writing the book with her was that, we spoke probably twice, every 2 weeks we spoke for 2 hours, sort of went through all the stuff. And it was basically like having a very intensive therapy relationship with a counsellor. It was pretty amazing. So lots of the things, because the book stems from my personal experience, but it spans out, hopefully, to be accessible to every motherhood experience. Hopefully, I'm sure there are some that, we haven't quite touched the surface of, but so I felt, for me, writing the book was a real journey of kind of, I really felt like I did come to terms with lots of things that I was probably still struggling with, but hadn't particularly broached properly. I kind of brushed them under my carpet.
Yes.
But things like, birth trauma, in the writing of the book, I realised lots of, when I explored the idea of post-traumatic stress disorder, so much of it resonated with me that even though I've never been and I don't think I had extreme post-traumatic stress disorder from my birth experience, but I definitely had significant birth trauma. But it's not something that I ever explicitly labelled as such. So I just look back on my birth experience and I just felt kind of crappy about it and like a failure. And it was only working through tools for other people to overcome these kind of difficulties that I was able to just explore it for myself as well. So I realised that how powerful it is to be given just quite simple tools to just adjust the way that you can explain your experience, or you can see your own experience. And so I think in the writing of the book, I realised that I was really tapping into a big passion. Sounds a bit kind of cheesy, doesn't it? But a big driving force for me is to help people to feel better about their life. So whether that's in Pilates to feel physically better, but there was something really powerful for me in writing the book, that actually simple things can really overturn sort of mental habits that you've been practicing without even realising it. So things like anxiety, that if you let that really dominate your thought team without thinking about it, you don't even think it's a bad habit. You just think it's something that is what you do. It's just you. And noticing that you can actually, with discipline and a bit of hard work, not even hard work, just noticing and consciously trying to overturn these things, you can make such a difference. And it really has made a difference for me. So that's the thing. So over the last 2 years, since in the writing of, and since the book came out, I'm just much more content. I'm much happier in my mothering experience. And I think that's it. I want to sort of really feel that I can transfer that same, experience to other people. And if I can, even just to one person, then that's my job done. But it has really kind of sparked off, something that I want to do more of. I want to be able to enable women to just make the best of life. The same kind of things that you're doing, allow women to tap into their inner power, in a way that we just don't. We ignore our inner power too much.
And sometimes it's just that sense of like, this just doesn't feel good, and you may not even be able to articulate what that is at the moment. But I think it's those practical tools of like, even just writing stuff down and going, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes just to, it sounds very indulgent just to say, to journal on it, but like just write a to-do list or write something. And one thing that I found, certainly being a mum, is that the new normal is ever changing, and it's really easy to get locked in a certain routine or mindset or situation and think, oh my goodness, this is never going to end. But actually, like, how am I here? This is, but actually,
it's also that perpetual. I think we live in a state of, right, I've just got to get through this, and then normal life will resume. I've just got to get to the end of this, whatever this is. And then you sort of think, right, when I'm getting through this is my life. It's not. I'm not going to emerge to suddenly this sort of sunny Teletubbies land of sunshine. And actually, what we need to do is work out how getting through the tunnel can be a little less dark, and not just look for the light at the end of it. But I think that's when you're on survival mode, it's quite hard to give yourself, like you say, finding even 5 minutes sometimes feels impossible. And it's only when you're given, if you have some kind of I don't know, you have someone else telling you to do it sometimes gives you the power to do it. And I think that's what a book is so, not for everyone. I don't think everyone, will use books necessarily, but for me, certainly it's a really powerful tool where I'll read something and then I'll go, right, okay, I have the accountability now. I want to do something about this and give myself space. And for me, that space is journaling, writing it down and offloading it onto paper in black and white. It's amazing how much lighter you feel, even if you've not actually solved anything in inverted commas. You do.
Yes.
Just sort of, it's like carrying heavy luggage along and dragging it behind you. Then if you just put it on a trolley, you can push it. And
yes.
It's like, oh, okay, I can still see the luggage. It's still there. It's still heavy.
You can look at it and go, oh, actually, it's not as bad. Or like, that bit is really ugly. I'm just going to get rid of that right now because it's not serving me. It's not helping. And why do I need those?
That's not mine. I took the wrong luggage from the trolley to put it back.
Why have I got the YSL luggage? That was not mine. And how have you found, because one thing that I always notice about you is, and I don't know if I've said this to you in person as well, is what a support and a champion you are of other women. Like I see you on Instagram supporting and adding encouragement and words, and I know that they come from such a genuine place. How has that community of Instagram or networking events or circles of women that you've been in, how has that changed your mothering journey or your business journey, I guess?
Both significantly, actually. I think certainly. I mean, I was on Instagram. I've been on Instagram for a long time, but it's only been since Freddie was born, so in the last 3 years, that I've really used it as a space for connecting properly, using it as social media, so being social and really connecting with people who I don't know and forging real, connections and friendships and working relationships. It's been amazing in that respect. Yes. And I think it has, it helps for me as a platform that I am an introvert, but I'm one of those, I don't know. I mean, I haven't done one of those tests, but I'm definitely extroverted introvert in that I love expressing myself through writing, and I'm very good at, connecting with people online, but I'm not so brilliant at actually coming to the physical, hello, hi, nice to see you in a room with people I don't know.
Yeah, and I'll never ask you to take a picture of me doing a pose. Yeah. When people go, oh, would you mind just taking my picture? I'm like, sure, but like, you're so brave.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Whenever I do go to Instagram events, I never take any pictures, and it's partly due to forgetting, but it's also mainly because I just am slightly awkward at that kind of thing. I'm not brilliant at taking selfies. So that side of Instagram, I'm always going to be slightly inadequate at. But the interesting thing about sort of the writing the Supermum myth and being on Instagram, it's really drawn out that pushing my own comfort zone barriers, because I was always the person who would make plans or have plans, and then at the last minute I would chicken out because I just felt too insecure, or I felt tired, or I'm looking, I realised actually that it was a social anxiety that I was letting myself off the hook with, sort of, feeling like I'm tired, or all these excuses would come up in my head, and I would end up not going to things that, because of just self-sabotage, basically. But it's been interesting over the last 2 years, and certainly since the Supermum myth has come out, I've been much more kind of like, right, okay, you just got to show up. You just got to, it doesn't matter if you are awkward and you don't take a selfie and, you can always go home. But I've really kind of forced myself, makes it sound like I'm really reluctant, but I've just not given myself the chance to let myself off the hook, basically. Unless obviously I'm not feeling well or my kids are ill or all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But and so that's been amazing for me, that actually I've genuinely found that Instagram has drawn out a piece of my character which I've sort of always let dominate my my social and networking. I don't like that word, but certainly with career, I would always be the last person who would go to any kind of networking drinks or anything. The idea brings me out in hives. Whereas I
just took a big gulp then, like, woof, yes, it would.
I know,
just at the thought.
Yeah, and I just never, when I used to have a in inverted commas proper job, I just didn't ever do that kind of, I never put myself forward and you know, kind of stepped into the limelight. I was always that sort of hoping everyone would see how competent I was at my job, but not actually willing to put myself out there. And it's just now realizing how so many women do that, and you know, and everyone, if only we could all see ourselves the way someone else objectively sees ourselves. And I think it's that kind of wanting to champion other women, because you kind of know that it's very rare for women to fully champion themselves, you know, and just trying to get that kind of elicit that little bit more of a spark that I think everyone's got inside them, but we often just don't take the time to let it glow. You know, we're too tired, we're too busy, we're too shy, we're too.
And kids give you a whole load of other excuses, like, oh, you know, he looks like he might have an ear infection a week on Tuesday. Yeah. I feel some more snot is coming, you know, or, oh gosh, well, we better not, just in case. And we're trying to cram so much into our lives all of the time and get it right. And it can, that pressure on ourselves. And also I know, and this is what I try to do, I guess, with my clients and with Instagram, is have that understanding and being that champion of somebody, because I know myself how hard it is sometimes.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
You know, if you've had a hellish day with kids of, you know, who have not done anything that you want them to do, or you're just feeling just below par, the last thing you want to do is go, right, let's just open my laptop and be all inspiring and write a new blog post.
And I think that's the thing, because it is, you know, confidence is such a kind of slippery entity. It's so tenuous, it feels so amazing when you feel confident, but then it can just go it's like a candle, you know, it can just be blown out immediately. And I think that's the thing, in the times when your candle is flickering and being blown, you just need to have someone to shade it and put their hand to cup it, and just say, look, you're amazing, and what that can unlock is extraordinary. I think, you know, it's just that hidden confidence, I think, is something that. And I think Instagram is definitely drawing that out of people. You know, it's really giving this platform to people who would otherwise not take the time to speak up. You know, we wouldn't speak up in a meeting, or we wouldn't be the person to sort of offer, you know, put our hands up to be a volunteer for something. And actually, Instagram allows you that kind of slight anonymity, I guess, or you know, being able to just not be judged, or not feel like you're being judged in the same way that you feel the eyes on you in real life, you know. Although I'm not saying it's not without its anxiety. I know lots of people who, you know, I think Instagram does have a side to it which is quite anxiety inducing if you let it be. But I also think the kind of positive effects of how enabling it is for people to just kind of be, you know, turn up the volume on the side of themselves that they love, you know. I think it's really, really a really good force.
Because maybe at school they weren't the three popular girls, or, you know, the circle would always be very small. So there would be that assumption, well, I won't even bother saying anything because nobody's going to listen. And I hear this sometimes from my clients. I'm like, oh my, and they'll have this moment of like, why am I holding on to this limiting belief about myself?
Completely.
When that is so old and from 25 years ago.
And that's the thing, you know, our core beliefs do run so deep within your soul. I mean, it's like, I think in the book I say it's like that chickenpox scar that you've got, and you've had it for so long you don't even notice when, you know, you've never known a time when it wasn't there.
Yes.
It's part of you. And it's really quite, it makes you feel very, very vulnerable to shine a light on those core beliefs. It makes you, because it's like kind of when you first found that Father Christmas wasn't real.
What?
You're like, oh my God, I believe that was true, and it's not. And it's the same when you know, when I first sort of realised that I was basically self-sabotaging myself by telling myself stories that I was incapable or not good enough, or, you know, I shouldn't try that because I wouldn't be very good at it. I mean, that's been my refrain throughout my life. My internal dialogue has been, oh, well, I'm not very good at that, you know. And it's like, it's only now that I'm like, oh my God, why did I listen to that truth that wasn't, you know, that kind of truth I was telling myself that stopped me from, I mean, no word of a lie, I didn't do French A-level because I was worried that I'd be rubbish at the oral exam. I mean, how rubbish is that? Like, it's one of those things you just, I go, oh, I could just go back to my 17-year-old self and go, what are you talking about? Just do French A-level, just do it. And, you know, if you screw up the oral, it's only 25% of the exam. It's really not the end of the world.
And it will all be fine. And I found this sometimes when I've done talks at universities, when you have the Q&A at the end of like, are there any questions? And people sort of want you to solve all of their life problems within about 90 seconds. And yes, and one thing I've realised is that is ever changing, and sometimes I look back, and retrospect is a beautiful thing, hindsight and all that, of what you go, I'm so glad that I really messed up so spectacularly in that moment, even though I was sliding down a wall like Pat Butcher from EastEnders, crying hysterically. But you look back and you go, gosh, that was such the making of who I've become. And
I know.
You have to go through those ugly moments and not just try for can we just make everything okay? And there's nothing worse than being in that environment of somebody going, let's just make it the best that it can be, because sometimes it has to get a bit ugly before it gets better.
And I think that's a really interesting point as well, because it's also about, I think we're quite, in our modern age, we think about quick fixes. We want the quick fix. And I know a couple of people who've bought, amazing, I'm very grateful, they've bought Supermum Myth, but they haven't actually read it. So it's one of those things where you sort of think, and for me, it's not a vanity project. I don't want people to read it to go, oh, you're so amazing. It's more that actually I do believe that the activities can help you. And I think that's the sort of the problem that we have as a society, as human beings who are flawed and wonderful, is that we buy books or we sign up for a program hoping that will change our lives, but then we don't actually action any of the things that we read or are asked to do. And I think that's it's a universal problem that's been studied by psychologists, and it's a human trait. But I think so things like, if you are plagued by, if you're really struggling with guilt, for example, in your working life or something, what we tend to do is just carry it around like a rucksack of rocks, like constantly. But we don't think that we could take it off and wonder why we put the rocks in there in the first place, because that involves, stopping the momentum of the direction you're going in your life, or stopping or changing habits, which is really quite scary and involves, work, involves kind of changing stuff. And I think we're just very change averse as human beings. We don't really like it. It's a bit scary. We're a bit like ants in that way. I was watching A Bug's Life with my children and over the weekend, and there's a bit where something falls in the way of the ant line, and the ant goes, oh my god, I don't know, the line is broken, I don't know where to go. And it's like one of those things that I think we're quite similar as humans. We're a bit like, I just don't know, it's all a bit scary. And I think that's, what battling against core beliefs is one of the most challenging things to do. And it's always going to be, it's like creating a new habit is always going to be challenging at the start, and not even just at the start. For the first, getting into a new groove and retreading, when you're living in very old worn pathways, to actually walk through long grass to create a new pathway is going to take that work. But once you've trodden the path, then that's where, the kind of Elysian fields is, but it's getting there is the hard work. And I think that's the problem. We kind of stumble at that stage, which is why then we'll have people, you might have someone saying, right, I really want you to fix this problem for me in 5 minutes. It's like, well, actually nothing's going to give you that 5-minute quick answer. You do actually need to, do some work. Makes it sound wrong, but discipline. I remember, have you heard of Emma Cannon? She's she's wonderful. She's a women's health expert and IVF, acupuncture, fertility expert. And I worked on a book of hers about 10 years ago, and she said something brilliant, which really changed the way that because I think I'm things like diets or exercise programs, I will very rarely follow through with them. I'll always kind of, I'll stumble at some kind of hurdle, and I won't get to the end. And she said, I remember talking to her about how we sort of we hold on to these anxiety, we live under this umbrella of anxiety quite a lot, and we don't like it, but we just stay under the umbrella, And she said, the thing is, it takes discipline you need to actually consciously choose not to think the way that you've been thinking for possibly the whole of your adult life, or from your adolescence onwards. And that word discipline really stuck with me, because actually it's really true. It doesn't sound very fun and joyful. That's the problem, the word discipline. But it's really necessary if you want to action anything, and I think we're quite open to that idea when it comes to work or project management or all that kind of stuff, but we don't see it as being necessary or something that we want to do when it comes to our own mental health. And I think that's a really important thing we need to change. That medication is amazing, and I think medication is a really useful tool for depression and postnatal depression, but I also think it's not necessarily going to work if it's the mental habits that need to be retuned,
I had that with Oscar when I don't know how old he was, maybe 17, 18 months. And I really hit a wall with tiredness, with overwhelm, I didn't have that, what have I done to my life? I didn't have that. Like, I was so happy to be a mum. Unfortunately, I was in a good headspace. Yeah. But it was like, I couldn't take on any more information. I'd learned how to wean him and clearly not taught him how to sleep. But it was almost like my head was about to combust, and all this like ugliness started to come out. And it was almost like, when you on going back to the old days of the generation game where you would see the toys going along or the microwave or whatever it was. And it was almost like all the weird things that had happened in my life, or the moments
coming out on that conveyor belt.
Yes, and I was literally looking at it going, oh, hello, when my granny died. Oh, hello, mum and dad's divorce. And it was so real and so vivid. And it was about a month of just, unfortunately, I was away for some of it, but it was like being in a bit of a hole of going, oh, this is so ugly. It felt like it, like in a smelly cave surrounded by your own emotions. And, but once I came out the other side, and of course there will be still things in there that, I will I'm a work in progress. Yes. But you suddenly go, gosh, that is not all of who I am. And the fact that I get to do this with my clients, where I get people to write their success timeline, as in, those seminal moments in your life when maybe you went to uni, or when you won that prize, or something you've maybe forgotten about. And then I get people to do the next layer. So if somebody says, I left a relationship of 11 years, it's like, what did that also teach you? What is under that? Or it's, actually I can change light bulbs, or I'm stronger, or I'm so glad that I resisted the urge to stay and to be the same as everybody else. And there's so much juice under there as well.
And that's really, because that's the thing, I don't think we ever really unpack that stuff. You just carry it with you, or it's in your suitcase on your trolley or not. But I think that's the thing, and offering yourself the space to just organise it a little bit is incredible. And I think it gathers, because we all have this sort of narrative of our lives, don't we? And even if we don't read the book of our lives, we believe it, we know it, we sort of know the stories, we know the subplots, we know all the characters. And I think that's the wonderful thing. But unpacking it allows you to sort of also feel that maybe you can change. You can change your story. You could go off in a different direction. It's, and I don't think we do that enough, really, because we're living our lives and we're so busy, and, but I think we're a bit blinkered to the idea that we're quite reactive rather than proactive in terms of how we choose to approach our days, and actually setting an intention and working out, as you say, kind of like learning those little backstories occasionally, or refreshing your memory about stuff. I mean, God, sleep deprivation, though, that's, I do think that's a really unexplored, and certainly weirdly, because postnatal depression is so, it's now obviously much more talked about, much more open. There's the taboos are lifting. I don't think they've lifted. There's still a fear around it, but I don't feel like there's an adequate exploration of just the fact that you're so physically depleted that if you are already, and even if you're not, but particularly if you're already sort of the kind of thought, the kind of internal dialogue that allows itself to go on a negative spiral. If you're sleep deprived and you know, if you've had a traumatic birth, or even if you haven't, say you had antibiotics after your natural birth because you got an infection, those antibiotics will have affected your gut flora, which will affect the way that you absorb
I'm learning
nutrients,
more and more about this. It's fascinating.
I mean, all of these things. And so if you're not absorbing enough nutrients and say you're breastfeeding, you're like double depleted.
Yes.
And then you're not going to sleep. Your mental health is going to suffer from that. There's no doubt, because your physical health is kind of rock bottom. And then partly because also we're expected to be pinging back into our bloody jeans and going to Zumba classes and, you know,
just strap your baby to you and, you know, give us a grapevine.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's the thing. There's so many layers of how your mental health is affected postnatally and prenatally and when you haven't had a baby at all. But I think postnatally there's such a huge cocktail of different factors which are not fully acknowledged. And then there's, you know, then you look at other women and go, oh, she's fine and I'm not. I'm obviously a failure. And it's just, you know, it's just a really challenging time not having any sleep, I think.
No, and the fact that you can't, you know, legally you're not allowed to drive after more than one lager, then there's no,
exactly.
God, just think what we, like, how dangerous it is not to have sleep consistently.
I know. It really, I mean, because I can't drive, and I started having driving lessons in between Freddie and Morris, and Freddie didn't, Morris didn't, see, my brain is totally gone. Morris didn't start sleeping until he was probably about 18 months, actually. He was reliably sort of sleeping-ish. But I started learning to drive when he was about 15 months, and because I'd found out I was pregnant again, I subsequently lost that pregnancy. But so I was learning to drive in southeast London when I was sleep deprived and hormonal. Wow. I mean, can you imagine? And I would like burst into tears at the slightest thing. And it was after like about 10 hours of lessons I was like, I don't think that actually this is probably the best thing to do.
Why am I on the old Kent Road with people beeping at me? What am I doing?
Yeah. So it was, and I genuinely realised, and luckily I did, I kind of levitated above myself thinking, do you know what? It's not that you're incapable of learning to drive, it's that you are sleep deprived and hormonal and it's not safe.
And now's just not the time. It will come another time, maybe, and, you know, that will be great. But for now, not so much. Just to finish with, I was going to ask you, what things have this new phase of life taught you about yourself that you didn't really anticipate, or perhaps you didn't plan and have been a lovely surprise? I would never have said that I was a brave person. And by brave, I just mean, you know, putting myself forward for things that scare me, or, you know, fighting for things that I believe in, or standing up for things. Or I've always thought that I was a little bit shy and would always be very shy, and I am shy, but I've realised that shyness it doesn't have to be a blocker for achieving things. Yes. And I think that's been the absolute sort of overwhelming change over the last, I guess, 2 years. So actually probably since Freddie was born, actually. It's been I've just been on this kind of mission not to. Also, I think turning 40, maybe that thinking about the timeline there, unpacking the timeline. I think turning 40, just a sense of, well, why would I not do this when someone else probably would do it eventually if I didn't do it, or, you know. And I think I suddenly woke up to the fact that very often I was always, like, for example, in a meeting scenario, which is a sort of, you can use that as a way of framing my general approach to life. If someone would be talking about stuff and I would be thinking inside, I want to say this, I think we should do this, I think I should say this, but I wouldn't say it. And either it wouldn't get said in the meeting at all, or it would get said by someone finally after some wrangling, and everyone would go, oh yes, that's exactly that's an amazing point.
And I would be like, why didn't I just say that at the beginning? And it's that feeling of not wanting to look back on my life and realise that that's been my kind of motto. Why didn't I say that?
Yes.
And I think that's it. So for me, it's now just be brave. Just don't sit on those feelings. If they're overwhelming and they really want to bubble up, just let them bubble up.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen? I think that's the major.
That is so good that, like, there's such a pressure to have everything figured out and you to break all your comfort zones by the time you're about 19 and a quarter, and you just think, actually, everything is ever changing. And my mum and stepdad moved to London last year after living in Lincolnshire for all of my lifetime, certainly. And
wow, big move.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I don't know how excited they'd be about me talking about it on the podcast, but I'm not giving their address or anything like that. But it was such a lovely thing to see of people, I won't say their ages, in their early 60s, of going, let's have an adventure, let's try something new. And they rented for a year and then they bought somewhere really close to where we live. And
that's brilliant.
It's just been fantastic on lots of different levels, because you get to see people in a new light almost. I mean, I never anticipated that I would live close to my mum, because it just wasn't in the picture. Yes, and I've lived in London almost half my life now. And so, these new surprises, and watching my mum at her stage of life going, of course, we've never lived in a city, but we're going to do it. It's given me a new lease of life.
And we impose those, because I think I'm quite a lot older than most of the people that I connect with on Instagram. I feel like I'm quite an old lady when sometimes. And actually what's been really interesting is seeing just quite how terrified people are of turning 40. And I guess we all had that when we were turning 30 as well. But I keep seeing lots of people going, the big 40, and I've got to do this before I turn 40, and there's a list of things I've got to do before I turn 40. And it's sort of like, well, why? Does a shutter come down when you turn 40, or does some kind of drawbridge come up and you're no longer allowed, there's no path beyond?
I know.
And I think we impose this, because similarly, I'm probably on some very longer term level doing that about 50. Well, at 50, I won't have fun, or 50, I will no longer wear dresses, or, we give these kind of quite arbitrary, kind of lockdowns at certain age, which does kind of give us a big fear of moving forward. And actually to realise that, well, why not? You can do. We're still exactly the same person inside. We're still I still want to dance to ridiculous, 90s music all the time in exactly the same way. It's just that now my son might go, "Stop dancing, mummy," when 20 years ago.
Oscar does that. No dancing. No. Stop the music. I'm like, no.
We used to be cool, and now I'm. But it's that I still have exactly the same feeling dancing to Blur as I did 20 years ago. And that makes me go, okay, probably in 20 years' time I still will. And now I understand my mum and dad, dancing to, Steely Dan, and me going, oh, goodness, so embarrassing.
In fact, I can almost smell that little Adidas 3-stripe jacket that I used to have and my cool little skater trainers. And it takes you back. So finally, I guess, a nice question maybe to finish with is, where would you like to be in 5 years' time?
Oh, in Thailand, maybe. I think that as long as I am, basically, I think I'm really grateful that I really love what I do. I come to, I think there are downfalls or there are potholes financially, or potholes in terms of, the fear of never getting work in the future, which are completely outweighed or balanced out by the fact that I genuinely can't imagine doing anything else or getting a proper job. Like a couple of times over the last couple of years, I have applied for desk editorial jobs, and, going back into an office. They're usually full time. You can't ever, there's no flexibility, and certainly in the ones that are advertised. And in a couple of the interviews I've had, I've almost had this inner feeling of like a bird being caged, like the idea of looking around the office and thinking, no, I genuinely actually can't imagine going back to that at the moment. I feel really lucky that I can, work around my children at the moment, and just, I feel like every day I wake up and I'm really excited about what I'm doing, which I think is a really important, and I think it's unsustainable to be kind of joyful about every single Monday task, obviously, but I do feel like what I'm doing is definitely what I'm supposed to be doing right now. So I sort of think in 5 years' time, I'd love to be doing a lot more. At the moment, I'm probably not teaching as much Pilates as I used to and would like to, but that's the sort of childcare logistical side of things. So I think in 5 years' time, if I'm teaching a bit more and writing more and just, I think that's probably what I want to be doing.
Just hanging out and enjoying life, and
in a hammock maybe with a banana milk.
So nice.
In the sunshine.
Well, I know that I've been in so many corporate offices or things, and people just look so miserable, and I just think, is this what we're going for, really?
And if that floats your boat, then that's amazing. I mean, I've never been a corporate person. I know I would be like fish out of water if I had to, work in a corporate world. And I know some people thrive on that, and that's their environment. I do think we need to just bring a bit more joy and life into our desk environments, though. I mean, apart from anything else, postural life. We need to move more and that kind of thing. But that's a modern life issue.
That is so fascinating what you say, though, about waking up and genuinely enjoying what you do, because I really feel like that's to do with momentum as well. Like, the more I do the stuff that I really love, the more that comes into my life as well. The opportunities always flourish and turn into something exciting.
Absolutely.
People want to find out more about you and come on over and say hi. Where should they go?
Instagram, I'm mothers.wellness.toolkit, and my blog is Mothers Wellness Toolkit as well, and I'm hopefully going to be blogging more regularly at the moment, because I've been finishing writing my next book, which is the Pilates for Pregnancy book. I've been slightly, I'm trying to do that in the 2 hours a day I have of preschool childcare, so it's been a bit mental. But yes, my blog is active and there, so I might not be writing that much on it at the moment. And I'm on Twitter, the Supermum Myth, and I think that's it on my social media. Actually, I occasionally am on Facebook, but I don't really know how to work Facebook as much as I do.
Me neither. Like, and if I put a picture of me like in a cool bar somewhere, people will be like, what is she doing? Which is, I guess, what I always used it for, like back in the day, but it doesn't quite have the same ring when you're mother of one. So it's a tricky one. Well, thank you so much. I've loved chatting, and thank you for sharing all your wisdom, and I just feel very calm at the end of this conversation. So I will be no doubt having some good dreams tonight, and thinking about what I need to unpack. It's always an interesting one, and not to be frightened of it. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be okay.
It's all going to be okay. Thank you, Anya.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear what you thought of the episode and share any takeaways with me. Come and find me across social media at Nicky Raby, or you can visit the podcast page, nickyraby.com/podcast.